Right. So let's say, for example, we have a global context with use context in our application. Then what we want to do is we want to check if the global state is changing. So what I want to do is create a new folder. So let's create a folder called context at the global level, like so. And in here, I'm just going to create a file called review context.tsx. And then let me just simply create this global context. Let me scroll down. We'll have a look at what's going on. So let me just export these into our types file, which we have over here. Export and then paste in our types. We don't need to worry about the types for now, but actually we can do so. Essentially, the review context type is contains our reviews, which is basically a review of ID, movie ID, and text. Then we have the action that we dispatch, which adds the review. And then we also have the clear review. So the payload of the add review is going to be containing the movie ID and the text as well. So that's the first part. Let's just import in the relevant types like so. We have our higher order component, which is our review context provider, like so. We have our actions in here, so add review and so on. You can see here function to add review and function to clear reviews. So think about when we're doing our unit test in the last video, what we did was we created tests for our utility function. So you could do the same for these ones. And then we also have our global state as well, which essentially is empty. But when we dispatch the action of add review, then it adds the review. And also when we clear reviews, it clears reviews. So essentially we will add unit tests for this. And then the review use review context is a hook as well. So we can essentially test this hook also. So that's the first part. We've created our global context. So now what I want to do is create the unit test for this. And what we can do is in our test folder over here is we can create a new file. So this file is going to be called useReviewContext.test.tsx. So let me just paste that in. There's a few things that happen with this one. So we have the describe block as normal, and then we basically pass in our it blocks as well. But for now, this one is going to be called use review context as our describe block. Let's save that. And then in here, we want to add our initial setup. So what happens initially? So in our review context, you can see our provider is basically empty. You can see here, this is an empty array. So that's how it should be at the start. So essentially, that's what we want to create the unit test for. So I'll just quickly bring that in. Let me save that. And there's a few things we need to import. So it initially has an empty review list. So let me import render hook from testing library React. Let me import our use review context that we just created. And also we need to import the review provider that we have. Now, what we are doing is we're rendering our hook. So when we create a custom hook or any hook, then we have access to something called render hook in testing library React. We are destructuring the result from the render hook. So if we hover over it, this is basically the first argument is a callback. So we render something, and then the second argument is an object. So that contains the wrapper of the review provider, so the higher order component. So now we expect result.current.reviews. So this is our reviews list to equal, and then it should be an empty array. So if you look here, this is an empty array. So let's save that. And now you can see the tests are all passing. We have 8 in total. So that's the first one, how you would essentially A, how to render a hook, and B, how to essentially check our global state and see if everything works correctly. So now that's the first test complete. The second one is we want to test the add review functionality and also the clear reviews functionality. So let's go ahead and bring in the test for the add review functionality and run through that. So essentially, if you just bring in the code, there's a few slight changes. So again, what we want to do is add in the hook that we're rendering. In our case, it's the review context, and then the provider that wraps around it. Then we destructure the result. So actually, let's add the comment in here of get the result. This gets the context. So let's just get that one. And then we'll also add in the same comment for the above as well. Then we want to basically do something called act. If you import this in from testing library React, act is basically do some action that we need to do. And then essentially it will say result.current.add review. And it takes in obviously the two arguments. So add review, if we go into here, it takes in a movie ID and some text as well. Then it updates the reviews of the initial global state from empty to whatever the ID is, and then adds in the movie ID as well, and also the text that we pass in. So first thing is it does that, and then we get the length. It should be 1. That's fine. And also we've passed in 1 as the movie ID, which it is here. And then we've also passed in the text as great movie. So we can also do something like const expected review like this equal to, let me just fix this. And then all you do is basically pass in this object. So command X, paste that in, expected review to equal here. So just to clean it up a little bit. And then now you can see if you scroll up, the tests are now passing. So that is what's happening. It's basically gets the context. This is how to add the review, expected review, and then this checks the review was added correctly, like so. So that is as simple as it is. The only difference being is how we kind of get the expectations and also how we render out the context with obviously render hook. So that's how it works. And then just to finally do the last one, which is clear the review. So in this scenario, we need to add a review first or add it into the base context first and then essentially clear it out. So again, add in our comment, this gets the context. Then we want to add the review. Then we want to clear the review. So again, add the comment in here. This clears the review. You can see here. So two functions are being called. First one, we add the review, then we clear the review, then the result should be empty. So that's it, really. I think that is as simple as it gets for how to add unit testing for your context, your global context. Again, if you're using Redux, it's the similar kind of pattern where you would have your render hook method in here, and that's what you would use, and then essentially do the same functionality as well. So as always, what we should do is add edge cases in. So finally, let's do an edge case. So basically, this will throw an error if used outside the review provider. So essentially, in the review context now, what we are doing is we're not passing in the wrapper like you see here with the review provider. So now Copilot's helped me a little bit there. So now what we are doing is we expect, and then we're rendering the hook of use review context, and then this will be thrown in here, which is use review context must be used within a review provider. If we look and find this, so let me just copy this text in our code over here. You can see if there's no context, then the error is thrown. So now what we're going to be doing is looking at snapshot testing, and we will do that next.